Meeple Nation podcast.
You don't say.
I do indeed. Let's try that one more time. Take two.
First try.
Meeple Nation podcast, episode 488. Our top 5 card games.
Welcome, citizens, to Meeple Nation. Grab your favorite beverage, pull up a chair, warm up those dice, and join us at the game table as we discuss board games and the board gaming world. Each week, the hosts of Meeple Nation share their love for board games and the amazing memories that come from playing games with some very outstanding people. Let us now join our hosts in their natural habitat, the game table.
We are the hosts of Meeple Nation. I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holliday.
I'm Mogan Howard.
I'm Andy Holliday.
And I'm Douglas Stewart. Meeple Nation is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. We absolutely adore our Game Toppers. One of the things I was thinking about recently, we oftentimes say you can take one of the Game Toppers and put it on any surface. But what we don't sometimes mention is that that surface could be just a couple of cheap folding tables. So when we say you can upgrade any space, you can literally upgrade a couple of cheap folding tables or an existing dining table, you name it. You throw one of these on there, you've got a premier gaming surface. Go check out GameToppersLLC.com. They've got toppers, mats, and a whole bunch of accessories that will help you make your next game night amazing.
Welcome to Meeple Nation. We are your hosts. I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holliday.
I'm Andy Holliday.
And I'm Douglas Stewart.
We have a webpage, and we would love for you to go visit it. There's all sorts of information there. There's blogs. There are links to our past episode. There is a link to our Instagram. And of course, there is a link to our Patreon page. We appreciate and love our patrons. If you too would like to become a patron, please go to our website, meeplenation.com, scroll a little bit down, and you will find that link to our Patreon website. We will give you a crisp high five next time we see you.
I love crisp high fives, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And if you haven't gotten one from Nathan, it's particularly special. It's worth becoming a patron for sure.
Not for the timid.
True.
This week, we have each selected our top 5 card games, and we are going to get into just a little bit about those. Who wants to start us off?
Well, okay. So first of all, I have to ask this question. Top 5 card games. Like, okay, I struggled with this because I was like, okay, when I think of a card game, I typically think of like a small box card game. Like literally, like a deck of cards, maybe a couple little things to go with it. However, I mean, most of the games we play have cards in them and are card driven. So do those count? I struggled, and I'm really curious about how you decided to make your top 5 lists here.
I asked the same question to myself as I was going through games, and I limited myself to games that only have cards for the most part. I mean, unless there's like aids, right, that help the gameplay with like a board or something like that, but really you're just playing with cards. That's kind of what I limited mine to. Maybe a little grayer, there's some dice that come into play in some of them, but for the most part, primarily are just card games.
It's funny because I did the exact same thing. Now, for those of you who don't know kind of how we put the episodes together, Nathan generally a little outline for our show notes with the topic that we're discussing, and then we'll each spend some time looking into that and going in and making our own notes and everything. And so we don't actually get together and communicate these things with each other before we get together to record. I did the same thing. I wrote down, in fact, exactly that. I struggled because at first I was thinking, you know, it needs to be just cards. But then I started thinking about Dominion. And I was like, you know, Dominion is definitely a card game.
For sure.
It is a card game, but you have all sorts of point tokens and different things that have come out with different expansions.
Well, and at this point, it's not small. There's 15 boxes. If you've got it all, you've got 15, 16 boxes on the shelf, right?
Right, and that was the other...
Almost a full calyx?
Yeah.
Whatever those shelves are called.
Yeah, it's like a full 3x3 calyx, yeah.
Yeah, and that was the other thing that I thought of too, right? Originally, it was like, it needs to be small. It needs to be something like Andy and Sabrina could take on their date night and play while waiting for dinner. And then I thought of Dominion, right? And I was like, that throws all the rules out. So that kind of helped me to decide, okay, yeah, I mean, if there's a board that goes along with the cards, obviously it's still a card game.
So I made 2 lists.
Hey, high five. Hey, give me one of those crisp high fives.
You are
Not from across the
Not
table.
from across the table. Yeah, never mind.
Too much of a stretch.
you are a cheater.
I made 2 lists too.
You're
I
both
struggled.
cheaters.
I struggled because I did this similar thing, right? Where it was a game, it is almost exclusively cards. So Dominion was on that list, and I'm like, okay, the coins and they aren't the key element of the game. The key element of the game is the cards. And then I had some other games that were very much card-driven games, but also included a board. That list was extensive, and I had a hard time coming down to 5 games on each of those lists. Because when I started, I had like 25 on one and 16 on the other, and trying to narrow this down to what are my favorite. Essentially boiled mine down to a list of games that is almost exclusively cards, and then one that is cards and boards.
You sound kind of like me. Your list of 25 and 16.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did get it down. I do have 2 lists of 5. I don't know if that's, I mean, you're right, Andy. That's cheating.
I have one
It's totally
list.
cheating, but I didn't know any other way to do it.
I have one list, and then I made a little honorable mention.
I mean, there's 4 of us here, and if 3 of us didn't follow the rules and have 10 games each, that's 35 games for the night. Yeah, we're not going to.
Especially because we haven't even started our lists, and
Well,
we're like 10 minutes in.
Yeah, we better get crack-a-lackin' then. Okay, so Dave, number 5. What do you have for us?
Number 5 for me is biggest stretch of those rules. It is a card game, but it includes some other components that are quite heavy in the game as well, and it's gizmos. Gizmos includes a bunch of marbles, but without the cards, the marbles are just marbles. Don't really mean anything. And so it is definitely driven by the cards, what the cards do. Each card is unique in color and gives you abilities. Gizmos is a great game. We've talked about it a little bit before. Andy just stumbled upon, and it has quickly become a favorite of a lot of people in our circle.
Gizmos was on my number 3 on my cards and board game.
Gizmos is a great game. Andy, what's your number 5?
My number 5, it's the one that was the biggest stretch for me because it's mostly driven by cards, but it was one that I just wanted to try to fit in, and that's Taverns of Tiefenthal. Deck builder game, but you do have a board and you are upgrading parts of your tavern. So that's the biggest of my games. It's a stretch as far as a card game, but the fact that everything is based around the cards, adding people to your taverns, all of the workers and everything that is going on in your tavern, that happens during the guests arrive phase when you're flipping all of your cards over. And then the fact that you're buying cards during your turn and adding them to your deck qualified it as a card game. But this is such a fun game. It's one of my favorites.
Taverns is a great game, but I am wondering if there's like a buzzer where we can, like, say, call foul or something.
Like I said, that one's pretty much a stretch. It's this one. It's that one.
There you go, Andy.
First try.
First try. Honestly, it's because I thought I had 5 games and I only had 4. So I hurried up and threw it on there.
But looking at your list has 2 number 1s.
Oh yeah, and that was my fault, by the way, because I was trying to run the thing on my phone.
Is that why it switched? I'm like, I knew I had 5. Oh, that's
who's
why
cheating
it switched.
now.
Yeah, Andy.
Wow.
I didn't have 2 number 1s. Dave switched my thing.
It was because when I tried adding numbers
Let
to
me
mine.
start over with my number 5, guys, since I actually had 5. David. I'm like, I knew I had 5.
Now
Like,
that I've
did I have
gotten away
4?
with one, let me actually start my list.
Well, just saying, you can delete all of that. My number 5 is Ohanami. We've used this game extensively. We've used it as a filler game, as a travel game. I have used it a ton to teach new players that are not familiar with games, and it's just a very simple, straightforward game. The scoring is very unique. It has kind of a fun drafting element to it. I really enjoyed the puzzle aspect of where you have your 3 columns and you have to decide where you're placing your cards because you can only place on the top and the bottom of your columns. It's been a fun one to introduce to new people and to kind of wet their whistle a little bit on the gaming side of things, and then maybe move them into more complex types of games.
I think it's just a great game overall.
It is.
Ohanami happens to be my number 5 as well. This is a game I've played 56 times. So I've played this game a time or 2. Something that I very much enjoy about the game is exactly what you said. It's very easy to teach. It's very accessible. Once you're through playing it, you can just pick it up and play it again. Or like you said, Andy, you can use it as a filler game, travel game, any of those. It's kind of hard to play on an airplane, just FYI, because when you're splaying out your cards, not as easy to do on that tray table. Overall, Ohanami is a great game. I have yet to meet somebody I've introduced it to, and they're like, that's the dumbest game in the world. Also my number 5.
Yeah, no, Ohanami's super solid. That's a really great pick. My number 5 is a game called 51st State. I've talked about this one a little bit before on the podcast. I absolutely love this game. It is 100% card driven. It absolutely has a whole bunch of tokens and resources and cardboard and other things that come in the box. But this is all about building a tableau, and that tableau is built out using cards. What I think is just absolutely genius about this game is the fact that the cards are multi-use. And I think that'll be kind of a recurring theme for me as we talk about card games. I love multi-use cards. 51st State does an amazing job at implementing multi-use cards into the game. The game has a resource called Connection, and you can use a certain type of connection to destroy the card for resources. You can use a certain type of connection to play the card in your tableau, or you can use a certain type of connection to turn the card upside down, and it gives you an ongoing benefit. So having that decision space just makes this game absolutely sing. And that process of drafting cards and building out your tableau, building up some of those resources that you just have ongoing, knowing when to destroy stuff, trying to figure out that sort of puzzle of how to build out your tableau and score as many points as possible is phenomenal in this game. Plus, I love the theme, post-apocalyptic. Everything about this is just great for me. I love 51st State. My second list, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, for kind of the small card-only games, my number 5 would be Skull King. For me, this game is just purely about the people that you play it with. This is a trick-taking game. I think it's one of the best trick-taking games out there. We have a group that gets together every Memorial Day to play games, and we always take this. We always set a table out and gather everybody around because it'll play a high player count, have a great time, acting like pirates, trying to throw everybody off, taking tricks. It's great fun. And that takes us back to Dave. Dave, what's your number 4? We're at 4 now.
Right. Number 4 for me is actually, it's a little higher on Andy's list, so I'm going to defer and let him talk about it when he gets to that on his.
Okay. So my number 4 is Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. You know, I think my favorite thing about this game is it's the only way, if Logan is turning into a pumpkin, which he usually does about 10 o'clock at night, it's the one way to get him to stay until 4 a.m. on game night. If we pull out Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, Logan is in, and he is in for the long haul. Such a fun deck builder. You play as one of the main characters, so that you play as Harry, Hermione, Ron, or Neville Longbottom, Harry Potter's friend. Play through all 7 years. You don't start out with any asymmetrical powers. As your heroes get older, they gain asymmetrical powers, and they get more powerful as they get older. The game gets more difficult. You put more content in every year. It just builds and builds and builds until you get to year 7. It's a riot. They have 2 expansions for it as well. Easily one of my favorite deck builders, and I think it's one that is just so solidly well done. I'm not big on movie-themed games just because I have been burned so many times. This one does not fall into that category of games that are just kind of garbage.
In fact, I think it does it well.
It really does.
And I get excited about it with its theme. The theme with the movie works great for me, and so that's one of the reasons that I like it. Absolutely solid all around.
When I play this game, I'm like, I want to go watch the movies. This is a super solid pick. And one of the things that this does really well that I love is that every time you start a new year, you start with the exact same starting hand of cards. So you start off, other than you're a slightly more powerful version, right? Because you've aged a little bit. You start off with the same deck of opening cards. The game just throws better tools at you as it goes on. So you have to get kind of smarter and smarter as the years go by and leverage some of those abilities more and more, focus on your deck building. It's a super great game and great theme and gets me excited every time.
Puts a deck builder that's a co-op, right? And it does kind of force you to work together. It's not one of those where you can just do your own thing. You actually really do need to work together to stay alive and to beat the game.
Yeah, in fact, it's one of those games where if you try to do anything solo or try to look out for just me, you're going to lose the game.
Yeah.
The group is going to lose the game.
I actually love playing Neville Longbottom for that reason, because he's a healer. That's what he does best is heals. When I play that game, by the time we hit, year 3, 4, I actually really feel like I am the group healer. I feel like I've taken on that role. And by the time you get to year 7, if he's not healing, you're not winning. And so I love that. I love that it lets you kind of take on those roles like you're saying.
Doug, number 4.
Boy, we've given this one a lot of love recently, but this is Earth. Number 4 is Earth. This one's new. It's on the hotness. A lot of people raving about it. I'm one of them. I think the accolades that this game is getting are well-deserved. I think its rating is well-deserved. This is just a great card game. Basically have a massive stack of cards and you are trying to build an island of flora and you're trying to sprout those cards, grow those cards, and everything is a net positive. It's simultaneous play. Somebody picks an action. They get to take the primary action. Everybody else gets to do stuff and it's all positive. There's no take that. There's no elimination, nothing like that. It's just a fantastic engine building game that lets you make a ton of cool choices. And it's all completely card driven. There is like a central board where some of the cards sit, but you don't technically need it. And there are some cubes and tokens to represent resources, but this game is a game all about the cards and how you can best play with them. And it's phenomenal. I love Earth.
It's a game Richie was very excited about. It's one he pre-ordered, quickly become one of his favorites as well. It's a really one. It's a really good one.
It's a really one.
It's a really one.
It's also a really one, but a really good one as well.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Both of those things.
Put it on my cards and board list. I put it at my number 2 because I really do enjoy this game, but I was putting probably too much weight on the board. Like you mentioned, doesn't really need to be there. Earth is such a great game.
I love it.
Speaking of such great games, Nathan, what's your 4th?
My number 4 is an amazing game. It's new to my library, and I have enjoyed this game tremendously. And that game is That's Not a Hat. That's Not a Hat has become a favorite. It was a huge highlight at our last SaltCon summer event. Every time I've played this, it has just been hilarious. Frustrating how quickly you can forget something that is sitting right in front of you. Hilarious watching everybody else struggle with that same memory loss of a card that they put down there or was just given to them 30 seconds ago, and all of a sudden I cannot remember that card.
I've only played it once. I knew this was going to be on your list. We played this at my dad's house. I played it with both my nieces and their husbands and my daughter Sierra and I. Sierra started it off and it was a racket, her card. And so she passed it to my brother was playing with us too. And she passed it to my brother and we got playing, right? And I knew that the racket was in front of me. It got over to me, went around the table over to my nieces and their husbands. And then it came back to me after a while. I'm looking like, oh shoot, what was my card? And I sat there and thought about it. She's like, you don't even know. Just go ahead and say something because I'm calling you on it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. And I'm like, here's a racket for you. Do you want a racket or something like that? And she's like, oh, crap. She's like, there's a racket out there. Dang it. And she didn't call me on it. And it's probably a good thing because that's what it was. But it was a lot of fun. I didn't know if I'd like it being described, but I actually ended up really having fun with it.
Played it several times with people who are reluctant. In fact, when I was teaching my wife, explaining the game, she's like, this is dumb. This is dumb. Why are we even playing this game? Let's play something else. And that was just because I was explaining the game. Everybody sees that that's a racket in front of them. But then as soon as she forgot her first card, she's like, oh, this game just became much different.
I can't decide exactly where it fits for me, right? And I'm not sure. Like, I thought about putting this on my list because I've had a lot of fun with it as well. I'm wondering how much of me holding it down is just because of the fact that, I have to be true to myself and the fact that I don't like these types of games. But I really like this game.
That's a great game.
That's awesome. So, Dave, before you start us off with number 3, I forgot to mention my cheat list. Mm-hmm. My number 4 was also Ohanami. I forgot to mention it because it was Ohanami. So you guys love Ohanami a lot. I love it just a little bit more. Ohanami's awesome.
Very good. Doug loves it so much that he gave us each a copy.
I have given away probably a dozen or more copies of this game.
And everybody who has received it has really enjoyed it. So
I didn't get a copy.
You already owned it.
Because you already had it. I gave you something else. I don't remember what it was. I think it was The Crew.
Chris Pie 5.
And a Chris Pie 5. That's probably what it was. But not from across the table.
Number 3 for me is also higher on Andy's list. So I'm going to defer to Andy.
Wow.
So what was did we get to your number 4?
Yeah,
now.
I'm about to talk about it. Okay. So my number 3 is Dominion. This is one I've talked about many times. When it first came out, this would be the only game that would hit the table on game night. We would play it over and over and over and over again. There were times when my wife, we would get the kids to bed and we would just play Dominion for hours on end. It doesn't hit the game table as often as I would like. In fact, I have expansions that I've never even played of this. I have everything. This one's close to my heart just because of the history that we have with it, that I have with it, and it really is a great game.
Yeah, Dominion was one that when it first came out, absolutely with our group as well, it was something that we just played over and over and over again. And then when Seaside came out, we played it over and over and over again. And what was it, Cornucopia after that, I think it was.
Intrigue came out and then Seaside.
Oh, yeah, Intrigue, Seaside.
And Prosperity. Well, it was Alchemist, which
I was going to say, don't forget about Alchemy.
That one was kind of dumb, but the rest of them were good.
For me, this game, like I said, it was my number 4. Part of it for me is also what it is, right? So when my son first went and did his long stint in juvenile detention, we would go and visit him twice a week. We got to the point where they were, you guys can bring a card game. We brought Dominion. It always got looks because they were expecting the small pack of cards as well, right? But we showed them like, nah, look, it's just cards. It's, we got that out, dealt out cards real quick. We had 1 hour for a visit. We just knew every time we were going to hurry and get this game done. And we were able to get it played twice a week, every week with Dalton. We just had such a good time with it. I remember some of my other favorite memories of this were actually with you, Andy, at your house, with you and Sabrina late at night. Probably my favorite all-time game of this, one where the combination of cards were amazing. End the game by buying a huge number of not the province, but the upgraded province, whatever it's called.
The colonies.
The colony at like a super cheap price because of the upgraded bridge, whatever that one's called. Scored a ton of points just in the one thing, ended the game. I know your wife was not happy with me.
Yeah, it hasn't hit the table since, so we really need to get it to the table.
Way to go, Dave. Ruined yet another game.
My only regret with Dominion is that I wasn't tracking plays when it really was hitting the table heavy, because this was one Lydia and I played just all the time. Like, it was just like, yeah, let's play Dominion. And you never played just one game at a time. Play a game, and then you'd shuffle or shift them around a little bit, and then you'd play another and another and another, and it was awesome.
Early in the deck building genre.
And it did it so well.
And it did it perfectly. Good pick, Andy. What about you, Doug?
My number 3, we're going to talk about in a little bit because it's higher on somebody else's list. Nathan, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is Seven Wonders Duel. I've had a ton of fun playing Seven Wonders Architect. At SaltCon a couple of events back, somebody said, you really need to play this. I owned it and hadn't played it. I finally got it out. My wife and I played it. This game has been a hit. I love this game. I play it over and over and over again. Architects is still great. Still very much enjoy Seven Wonders Architects. But Seven Wonders Duel just hits differently, makes my list because it's awesome.
I had a very hard time not putting this one on my list. I really enjoy this one. It's rare that I love a game that is it is meant for 2 players and 2 players only. This one is great. Does that bring us to number 2?
Number 2.
Seven Wonders Duel is a wonderful game. It's also a game that, in my opinion, is made better with its expansions. Gora and Pantheon. I don't know how you pronounce those, but there's 2 expansions for it, and they are wonderful. They are really good, and they add a lot. I think the base game is very solid and is good enough on its own. It can stand on its own 2 feet. What's awesome is if you then want to take it another level, you add an expansion. And if you want to take it another level after that, you can throw in that second expansion. And it becomes probably one of the best 2-player games out there.
I'm not a big Seven Wonders fan in the first place, but this one I really, really like.
100%. And that brings us to number 2.
Number 2. So my second favorite card game, fairly new. Played it a bunch, and I want to keep playing it. It's called Ark Nova. I think this was your number 3,
This was
Doug.
my number 3. Yep.
Yeah, Ark Nova is a great game. One of those games, like we've talked about, it's a card game. It has a board, and it has scoring pieces.
There is a lot to this, and of all of the games on my list, this was the one that cheated the very most as far as having additional stuff. Again, going back to like what we were saying about go ahead. Oh, Andy.
Fail.
No, absolutely not. Because kind of going back to what I was saying about Earth, this game is all about that deck of cards. It's a massive deck. I think there's 220 plus cards in that deck. And they are all unique. Every single one of them is completely unique. There's no duplicates. Really creates one of the funnest environments to play a game as you are hunting for cards that have the right icons you need, and you're trying to build out your zoo. Honestly, trying to do about 50 things at the same time, it seems like.
Right.
But the way that it all culminates together, I think is just absolutely wonderful.
You mentioned so many different things that you're working on, but there's just 5 simple actions.
Right.
It's a little overwhelming at first. Then when you really start to think about it, you're like, oh, actually, it's quite simple.
I think you guys are playing a different game than me. I've only played this once.
Well, you need to play it again, Andy.
I just think you were playing this game with Dennis and Dave.
I was at the time, yes.
So I just think maybe you should give it another shot.
Okay.
It is an exceptional game.
Now, Nathan stepped out of the room for just a quick second, but I know he had the same experience with Ark Nova. He is firmly in the Andy camp of, ho hum, Ark Nova, not for me. Honestly, this game, it has the goods. This is a really, really great game. And it bothers me, actually. I'm actively bothered that you two don't like it more than you do, because it's just great. It's awesome design. I think if you like Terraforming Mars, I know they get compared a lot, but I think it's for good reason with the icons and everything else. If you like Terraforming Mars, you'll love this game, but this game cuts out what a lot of people find annoying about Terraforming Mars. You're always going to get your turn as it's coming around the table. You're not going to hit a point where you pass and everybody else plays for another 30 minutes. So in that regard, I think it's awesome.
I need to sit through another teach where there's only one person teaching. I think I had several teachers that time too, and it was just a little bit of a jumbled mess.
Okay, I'm making it my personal mission to get you and Nathan back into Ark Nova, because it's just so good.
We'll see. No, I really actually would like to try it again. They've changed how the scoring is a little bit. Interesting to see how that is. It is a really good game. It really is. But it's just one of those ones that I've played with a couple of people that I just takes away the fun for me.
Well, like I said, I'm going to make it my mission to make you guys like this game.
Well, I mean, I think it's a noble mission too, just like Dave wants to get Andy to play Terraforming Mars again. But.
Yeah, but I actually think there's a chance I can fulfill my mission objective.
Well, I think there's a chance. Yeah. I think Dave can do it too.
I'm not sure about that one.
Well, Andy, what is your second?
My second is Doug's number 1, so I am going to hold off.
Okay. My number 2, I don't think is on anybody else's list, and that is Marvel Champions. I won't spend a lot of time talking about this because at this point it is a huge game. There is a lot of content for this, and if you want to collect it all, good luck, because you got to sell a kidney or something like that at this point. I am Marveled out, right? Like, I have Marvel fatigue, and there are Marvel versions of so many things hitting the shelves these days. I'm not interested in almost any of it. Tired of the movies. I'm tired of it all. Marvel characters are from my childhood, right? Like, I love superheroes and I hold them in high regard, but I'm weary. I'm not weary of this one. And this game, more than any other game on the shelf, makes me feel like I am taking on the role of one of those superheroes and going toe to toe with one of the rogues. And I absolutely love that. Completely card driven. There are some little tokens and stuff, but it's all cards. I love the pre-constructed deck aspect of this, because what you're going to do is you're going to go through the card library. You are going to create a deck that represents your superhero. See if you were any good at constructing that deck. You're going to take that deck and you're going to pit it against different rogues. And they have gotten really creative, especially recently with a lot of the X-Men stuff that they've come out with, to make those encounters feel fresh and fun and exciting. I love this game. I will say it is not good at 4 players. I would never play this with more than 3. It does get long and it bogs down if you have too many people at the table. But for 2 or 3 players, even solo, because I play a lot of it solo, honestly, probably the best Marvel superhero experience you can have at the table.
I enjoy Marvel Champions, not as much as I enjoy my number 2. Marvel Champions, I think, is really good, but I think I feel the same thing where I got a little fatigued with them. I was all in for a while. It wasn't hitting the table like I wanted it to. I think it goes back to the same issue with other games, collectible or they're customizable like that. Often, if you're going to play with somebody else, you have to rely on them for the cards. If you're going to customize your own deck, you have to hey, can I borrow your cards? Or hey, can I spend an hour looking through your cards beforehand? As the owner of the game, you're more inclined to know what's there and to be able to construct those decks and enjoy the game that way. That was the reason that it kind of fell off my radar, but still very good game, very much enjoy it. And I like the whole can flip your identity over, you're on your hero side or you're on your civilian side, and the different nuances that come with being one or the t'other. I think that is very well done.
This is one that I would love to build some deck, pre-construct them, teach you guys how to play, and just see what you feel. Because you haven't played this, right, Dave? And Andy, you haven't either.
I have not. I'd love to.
I've actually played it a couple of times. I do. I enjoy it quite a bit. It's one that I would actually love to play more to get to the point where I can build the deck. Sure. I've played it with a couple of pre-constructed.
Way to go,
You
Nathan.
can do it.
You got it.
I've played it with a couple of pre-constructed.
Yep, pre-constructed decks.
I've played it with a couple of pre-built decks.
There you go.
And it was fun. I would just really like to get to the point where I could build my own.
Going back to like if you and I, Doug, played, because I still have a lot of stuff and you have all the stuff, I could construct something and we could play something together where I would feel more invested in my character because I have some investment in it. I would be very much interested to get a game with you and I.
Yeah.
Wow, thanks, Nate.
That would be awesome.
Andy, what do you want to do?
Not
I would
terraforming Mars.
Thing about this game, I think that would be really cool would be take one of my favorite heroes and specifically try and build their deck. You know what I mean? So I can come into it like Nathan, for example. Spider-Man is his favorite Marvel superhero, and he can come in there with his Spider-Man deck because this is his guy, right? Doing that, I think, would be super cool.
And honestly, that's where the game really shines, is when you try to customize building your deck like that. The game does this thing where all of the hero decks, they come pre-constructed. You can technically pull it right out of the pack and it's ready to play. So it comes with everything you would need to play a game. And in that regard, I like it because you can just say, hey, what hero do you like? Here's a deck, go. It's good for teaching and all of that. But I'm going to be honest, the decks that they create for the heroes are not anywhere even close to as good as the deck you can create using the full library.
So is this like a funner version of Overpower?
Yes, very much a funner version of Overpower.
Okay.
Or even a fun version of Overpower.
Or even a fun version of nice.
And actually, I really enjoyed Overpower back in the day. Comparing it to Overpower very much elevates the game.
Okay.
My number two, I've kind of been skipping my little card only game list here a little bit. My number 5 was Skull King, then Ohanami. My number 3 was The City, which I'm not going to bother to talk about right now. It's just a great card only game. If you're familiar with Jump Drive, it's very similar to that, same designer. It's just all about building out a tableau of high scoring cards. I really like The City. We actually go back and forth on whether we like The City and Jump Drive, which one we like more. I think I'm still leaning to The City, but I'm coming over to Jump Drive, especially with some of the recent expansions. But both of those really, really good. And then my number 2 on my card only list is actually Nathan's number 2 on his For Reals list, which he's going to talk about right now.
Right now. And that is another Marvel game, and that is the original Marvel. Well, I guess an Overpowered would probably be the original one. Legendary, a Marvel deck building game. This game, I think, does it well. Follows right in the heels of Dominion. It was out fairly close to Dominion. I'd have to look up the dates. Don't have it right here. Standard deck builder where you start off and then you're recruiting heroes. You're recruiting superheroes that are there in the city. Recruit their help to save the city. There's villains that are coming in. Each major attack is led by one mastermind. That mastermind has encouraged or recruited other villains to help him or her out, be able to try to take over the city. I like that. It doesn't lock a certain player down to a certain hero. It gives you variety. Everybody's seeking to find out or find the powerful versions of those cards for a particular hero and just be able to get their cards to mesh well. You go back to one of Andy's favorite games, Nightfall, where it has the chaining that goes on, and there's some chaining-like abilities that happen in Legendary as well.
That's cool.
And have you not played Legendary?
No, I haven't. I own it. I've never played it.
Oh, we need to fix that too. Marvel Champions and Legendary Marvel deck building game both need to hit this table. There's so much content, a lot like Marvel Champions too, that there are several expansions that are out of print. But this has been Upper Deck's kind of champion game. I mean, I think they're still kicking out stuff for it. That system, the Legendary system and Legendary Encounter system, branched off on Upper Deck's library of, they've released several titles. Some of them good, some of them not so good. But Legendary, a Marvel deck building game, is phenomenal.
I actually misread your list. So my number 2 on my cheat list is your number 1. So this is not one I have played, and I am very intrigued. A lot of these Legendary games, they look pretty good. This is the same system for like the 007
Yes.
and some of those other IPs.
Alien Encounters,
yeah, that's what I was
Predator.
thinking. Yep.
Yeah, those are the good ones. Not so good ones are their Big Trouble in Little China and their Firefly one. Both of those kind of flopped.
That's too bad.
Which is really too bad because they were IPs that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, for sure.
So before we get into our number ones, I'm going to mention my honorable mentions real quick. They are just 3 simple games, not in any order. Jaipur, Coloretto, and Mamma Mia. All just strictly small in the box card games. All pretty awesome.
We just pulled Mamma Mia out the other day and played that 3 times.
I had some honorable mentions as well. Mine was Catan the card game, Ticket to Ride the card game. Nightfall was on my honorable mentions as well. Honestly, Catan the card game is my favorite Catan game. It's a great 2-player game. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Fleshing out our alternate lists, my cards and boards list consisted of number 5, Dixit. It is very heavy card driven, but it does use that board to track your score and everything. Number 4 was It's a Wonderful World, which was
excellent game. Yep.
Yes, very much enjoy that game. Number 3 was Gizmos, which we talked about. Number 2 was Earth. And then my number 1 was Millefiori, which I really enjoy how Millefiori uses that single deck, large deck of cards, but allows it to facilitate the actions on, 6 or 7 different sections of the board.
Yep.
Makes the game experience phenomenal. I've already said phenomenal tonight. Makes the game experience just wonderful. Such a simple deck of cards. Then the other pieces that you use just make it pretty.
On to the number ones now. Number 1 on my list, as it should be on all of yours, is Terraforming Mars.
Sorry, just threw up in my mouth. Do you want to elaborate why in the world that's your
are we
number
done
1?
with that? That seems like you just said it. Okay, we're done. Moving on.
I mean, it doesn't really need much more. I mean, it's been the number 1 game for like a lot of people for long enough that I think everybody pretty much knows that it is the great Terraforming Mars. It is a game that Andy has committed to playing with me again under certain circumstances.
Where you're not at the table?
And where all the blue cards are removed.
No, not removed. I just will not get any blue cards.
That was not the deal.
That was the deal.
No.
That was your
now
deal.
we're changing.
Maybe
the
it's
deal.
next life. Maybe in our next life, I'll play Terraforming Mars with you, David.
Anyway, Terraforming Mars, great game. If you are ever at a convention that I am at,
Don't do it.
and you also love Terraforming Mars,
And have 6 hours to spend.
why don't you come find me and say, you know what? Let's get this game to the table since these guys are lame.
And when you say these guys, you mean Andy and Nathan.
Yeah, I'm pointing up there and there.
Because I like Terraforming Mars.
I will own that 100%.
I actually like Terraforming Mars quite a bit. I will not play it with the draft rules anymore. I know it's for people who really enjoy the game and want to maximize their turns, but for people who just want to sit down and enjoy the game, I find the non-draft version to be exceptionally better, more enjoyable, and not 4 hours, and worth playing.
My issue with Terraforming Mars is I just don't get to play it very much. In fact, it's probably been a good couple of years since I've played Terraforming Mars. The actual Terraforming Mars.
Right.
We play Ares Expedition all the time. I love that game. That's another great card game that almost made my list. In fact, I'd have to probably at this point do a full rules review. It's been a long time, but I do really like it. It's a good game.
Andy, number 1?
My number 1 is
1.5.
My number 1 is Thunderstone Quest.
Oh, that's right. This was my number 3 that I deferred to you.
Yeah.
So we introduced this to Doug over a year now, hasn't it, since we've
Oh
played
yeah,
that?
it's been actually a couple years now. Yep.
I love Thunderstone, regular game Thunderstone, and Thunderstone Quest basically turns Thunderstone into a campaign game. It's wonderful. Adds a little bit more to it, a little bit more to the dungeon, gives you more options of monsters to fight and some obstacles to overcome when you go to the dungeon. But on top of that, once you finish like the first game, you get to keep a card that you had purchased that for that game, and you get to carry that over into the next game, and the next game you get to do the same thing, and so on. So, and when you win, you get first pick. Nobody can pick the same card to carry over. So there are perks to winning each scenario that you're playing through. It's one that we really need to bust out and play again.
It's on the pile of incomplete campaign games.
It is.
And I just lament that every time I think about it, because it is. It's a great game.
It's a wonderful
Thunderstone
game.
Quest is awesome.
As you talk about it, I kind of want to make it higher on my list, but I'm not going to. But if we get it to the table and play it more, I might.
Probably better than Terraforming Mars, huh?
Yep.
No, I love, because campaign deck building is one of my favorite things. Campaign building is or campaign games is one of my favorite things. And so for me, this game is awesome.
FYI, there's 2 new expansions that are out for Thunderstone Quest.
Okay, let's order them. Dang it. All right, Doug, what's your number 1?
So my number 1, which was Andy's number 2, and I don't think it's going to be hard for anyone to guess who's been listening to the podcast with me on it recently. It is Arkham Horror, the living card game.
Living
weird.
card game.
Going back to that Southern thing we were doing before.
Nailing
The
it,
living
guys.
card game. It's Arkham Horror, the living card game. I absolutely adore this game, top to bottom. I love the story, pre-constructed deck mechanisms, art, the way that the whole campaign flushes out, and you use cards to create the map, right? This is all cards, few little tokens to track like sanity and health and some things like that. And I've seen some really tricked out versions of this, and I've seen some just ho-hum, plain Jane versions of this. Doesn't matter. It's all about the cards. And the cards are phenomenal. Deck building is phenomenal. The story is phenomenal. The system is phenomenal. I just absolutely love this game. I can't get enough of it. In fact, my good friends that I play with, Matt and Monica, we just completed another campaign. We just got through playing through the Scarlet Keys, and it was awesome. It's probably my least favorite campaign, and I loved it. So if that says anything about the quality of the campaigns that this game has to offer, Arkham Horror is just amazing. It's phenomenal.
This is your favorite game overall.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Now, this is one that I still haven't been allowed to play, so I can't really say where it fits for me, but I'm sure I'll like it.
As soon as your number 1 game is no longer Terraforming Mars, maybe you'll be allowed to play. But it is really, really fun. I love the theme. The leveling up is fun. Once you get done with a scenario, right, you get to go and level up and pick through cards. That's just really fun to try to get cards that will build on each other. And I like the fact that for some of the scenarios, at least the ones we were playing, there were like lasting consequences that go along with the story that, okay, the next time you play, you have maybe a boon or a penalty of some kind. In my case, it was a penalty because my house burnt down. I love how challenging it is. I love the co-op, how you really do need to work together and you plan out what you're going to do. A very solid game.
100%. My big thing is I just want to play it more and more and more. They do these return to boxes where they have kind of revisited, rebalanced, and added new things to each of the campaigns. And I haven't made it to all of those. I've played through all of the campaigns, but I haven't made it to all of the return to campaigns. Anytime you guys want to play this, I'm totally down. It is just wonderful.
This is one I wish I would have gotten into when it first came out, but I didn't care for Arkham Horror very much. So I turned my nose up at it. And I wish I wouldn't have.
This is one that I've played a ton of. I wish, Doug, that you had joined our group sooner, or at least before I culled mine, because
I wish you would have joined sooner, not just because of that.
Andy's not wrong. Not having anybody to play it with, played a lot of it solo, and I enjoyed it solo. Just didn't hit for me solo, though. One that I really enjoyed playing with other people. When it was just a solo game, it ended up on the chopping block.
Yeah, and that really is too bad. You're 100% right. And we've had this conversation before. It is more fun with other people, but it is especially more fun with other people who are invested.
Absolutely.
And if you didn't have anyone you were playing with who was invested in it, I can see why any game would make the cut under those circumstances. So I get it, but yeah, I love Arkham Horror. It's amazing.
Nathan. You want to finish this off?
So my number one is another game just out this year, but it is a game that I have enjoyed immensely, and that's Star Wars, the deck building game. One that Doug and I played for my first time, played it together. He whipped my butt. Been able to play with my daughter. All I have to say to her is Star Wars. She comes running. We play 2 or 3 games. Our games have gotten fairly challenging, pushed that 30-minute mark quite a bit. We're both actively seeking to retain capital ships to protect our bases, a battle of attrition, trying to take out a ship, have another ship come back, but to try to get to their bases. Star Wars, the deck building game, the card play is great. The shared market row, where I can buy cards that are mine. If there's cards that are on my opponent's, I can attack those cards. So eliminate that option from my opponent for buying that card. And then there's neutral cards out there that both of us can buy. And then there's cards that are safe as well. I mentioned those capital ships. Those capital ships can't be destroyed or sabotaged by the opposite side. So those are always there to be able to purchase. They tend to be a little bit more pricey, so you have to save up for them or hopefully get a good card drop that you'll be able to afford them. But Star Wars, the deck building game, fantastic 2-player game. Has that small little board. Anxiously now, I'm looking forward to more content. I haven't seen anything on it yet, but I would love to see some further developed content for this game. But as is, still a great game.
It seems like it was developed with expansions in mind. Feels that way to me anyway. And I think it needs them. I think you're right. I mean, I've played this enough times now that I'm like, okay, we could use a fresh influx of new cards. Would be really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And even newer versions of some of the heroes or just more content. There's so much material in the the Star Wars cinematic universe now that can be used. There's no Mandalorian. There's no Obi-Wan, is there?
No, there's a ton of stuff.
There's
haven't
a ton
included
of people that haven't been included. Yeah, I'm looking forward to more content. Great game.
Fantastic. That was on my cheat list. That was my number 2. My number 1 on my cheat list was Radlands. I didn't mention that, but it's Radlands. I love Radlands. Great little card game. Go check it out.
We didn't mention Magic the Gathering.
You're right.
I loved that game when I was in high school.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. It got way too expensive, so I had to stop.
I had issues with Overpower and Star Wars, the Decipher, Star Wars, and Star Trek collectible games. Magic I could not touch because I was already getting my wallet robbed left and right with those 2 games because I have issues.
Well, me and my kids still on occasion have just a Magic draft night. We don't collect. I don't collect Magic cards, but I will buy a brick. Like when they do their core set stuff, I'll just buy the core set every year. And I've got a bunch of those just sitting around. And so we'll just do a draft night. We'll just draft and build a deck and play them against each other and have a great time. So if that's something you guys are interested in, I would love to do that with Magic.
That'd actually be really fun. It's been a long time since I've played Magic, and I've got all the really old cards that probably would get destroyed by all the new stuff. It's still fun. It's a great game.
That does it for our top 5 card games. Thanks for listening.
That sounded really depressing, by the way.
Well, that does it for our top 5 card games. Thanks for listening. Until next time,
we'll see you shuffling those cards and dealing out a new game at the game table.
Thank you for listening and being a part of Meeple Nation. If you would be so kind as to follow, subscribe, share, and rate or review this podcast, it really helps to spread the fun. You can be more involved in supporting the podcast by joining the nation at patreon.com/MeepleNation, or you can find a link at the top of our webpage, meeplenation.com. And while you're there, look at all our extra content. There are links to all our past episodes, a wide variety of blogs, pictures from our Instagram feed, and bios for all the hosts and our awesome bloggers. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all under Meeple Nation. If you would like to chat with the hosts or other members of the nation, you can join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. We hope to see you again at a game night, a con, or maybe a suspense-driven evening of Werewolf. Thank you for listening and supporting Meeple Nation, and stay tuned for next week's episode.
Thank you so much for listening. We very much want to thank our patrons who help keep the podcast running. I personally want to thank my co-hosts for all the help they provide with both content here on the podcast, in addition to what we have available on our website. Without them, the podcast would not happen. If you too would like to support the podcast, you can join the nation at patreon.com/Meeple_nation. Or you can find a link to Patreon at the top of our webpage, meeplenation.com. If you have any questions, comments, or games you feel should be on our radar, you can always reach us at meeplenation@gmail.com. We can't wait to hear from you. I am grateful to Doug and Andy who helped me edit episodes, and I want to thank James and Kim Clark who do the editing on our blogs and on our webpage, which can be found at meeplenation.com. We want to thank Brain Detergent for our music. If you want to find more from him, you can follow his links that can be found on our webpage, or simply search for Brain Detergent on YouTube to find more of his tracks. Thank you again for listening and being part of the Meeple Nation community.